Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us at Survey and Spatial here for today's webinar on artificial intelligence. Unfortunately, our original speaker, Louisa Bloomer, has been called away. So today's presentation is being given by Asad Murad, who is based in the North Carolina office as the data science manager. Asad has a doctorate focused on watershed hydrology, hydraulics, and environmental change. As a data science manager, he is advancing Stantec's innovative push to become a leader in the AI and digital spaces. Now, for those of you online, I'm sure you're familiar with how our Q&A works for these presentations. If you have any questions at all throughout the presentation, please pop these into the Slido box, and Asad will answer these at the close of his presentation. So welcome, Asad.
Thank you so much for this introduction. Yeah, I, in fact, very much look forward to the Q&A piece. I think that's going to be the highlight of this. But I do have a few slides to present. And I thank you all for being part of this webinar. The focus of this presentation is going to be what everyone's been talking about recently, chatbots and generative AI. What are their uses, risks, and potential? And I'm actually going to bring some real world use cases from the way I've used it in the past 2 days, and highlight some of the different things I would like to present. So just a couple slides, just presenting myself. My name is Asad Murad. I'm in North Carolina, doctorate in environmental science, and currently a data science manager. I have also deep knowledge of GIS tools, including GrassGIS, QGIS, and ArcGIS. And I've also helped develop an AI-based tool called Flood Predictor to predict flash and riverine flooding, and soon enough also coastal flooding across the globe, in fact. And it heavily uses a lot of GIS technologies. Some of my passions are, the environment, the carbon cycle, the water cycle. I also like to contribute to open source software, and Python is my forte. Really, it's what I use to do a lot of my coding, especially in the field of machine learning. It's very popular. And really, my vision at Stantec is to really cement it in the architecture, engineering, and construction industry as a leader in the digital and AI space. There's a lot of work to be done there, but there's also a lot of opportunity. And I think with all the investments Stantec has made in the past few years, I think we're in the right path. But I'm happy to be here and share some of the lessons. I thought I'd start by talking about what is AI, what is machine learning, what is deep learning, and what is generative AI. Because these words get tossed around interchangeably, and it might not be very clear what the differences are. And I thought, as a good basis for this conversation, to briefly define each of these and how they relate to each other. Artificial intelligence is the general theory of systems embedded in different environments and can make decisions and act with a specific purpose. Machine learning specifically deals with the realm of systems that automatically improve their performance through experience. That's really the key behind machine learning. More experience, better performance. Deep learning is a subset of machine learning where neural networks, uh, a lot of people create the analogy between neural networks and the human brain, because we have neurons, and the neural networks act almost the same way in a computational sense. But these are neural networks that are multi-layered, and that's why they're called deep. And the reason they're very helpful is because they're so big, they can hold so much more information and learn high-level features. From deep learning came generative AI. which are models that can generate new content, whether they're written, visual, or auditory. And this is these are how these four concepts and relate to each other, in fact. And I want to focus mostly today on generative AI and especially the rise of chatbots. Some of the core principles of generative AI I wanted to share. There are three of them I wanted to share, in fact. The learning patterns, generating new data, and how generating that data leads to improvisation, but also a risk everyone needs to be aware of called AI hallucination, which I'm going to explain quite clearly in the next few slides. All of the visuals you see were created using chatbots. And in fact, the use case I was going to show was my experience creating these and some of the disappointments along the way. But in terms of generative AI, the learning pattern really I wanted to mention is that they learn from a vast amounts of data. They have these web crawlers that go and scrape tons and tons of information from the internet, from the public internet, and feed it into these models, which is why you can really ask them a ton of questions. And using the information they've learned, they can generate new data. And so these models create original pieces of data that mimic some of the inputs, but they're not exactly the inputs they have seen, although sometimes they are. And I'm going to talk about some of the risks of that. And because it generates new data, it doesn't mimic totally the information it has seen. It could actually produce responses that are wrong, and that could lead to ethical issues. And this is typically called AI hallucination, where it really wants to please the user interacting with it, but in doing so, it actually creates a response that is false. And very briefly, ever since generative AI became big about 2 years ago with the release of ChatGPT by OpenAI, the industry has embraced it. In customer service, they didn't need anymore to man call centers. Using it for document creation. I use it for document creation, for example, if I have a large document I want to summarize, and I can explain how to do that. Generative design, architects and designers, for example, could get a first pass at a design for a building, using a model, and that cuts up a lot of the time and effort that goes into that initial first pass. And for big companies like Stantec, enterprise data search, it would be wonderful for employees to be able to write human readable questions and get the data they need without having to go and navigate systems that are hard to use. So let's dig a bit deeper into chatbots here, because these are really the tools that have made generative AI usable for really everyone who has an internet connection. A chatbot is just a computer program that you can have a conversation with. But not all chatbots have AI in them. In fact, they've existed way before Gen AI even became a thing. But modern chatbots do have AI. They're called conversational AI, and they're usually connected with other techniques called natural language processing that helps them understand what you're asking, especially if you're not providing a lot of context. And I'm going to talk about the importance of context in the next few slides. But what AI has done to chatbots is that it's made them more interactive. It's made them more personal. And you can personalize your chatbot through prompt engineering, which we'll also dive a bit deeper. And it's made them scalable in terms of being able to use the same chatbot for different applications, whether to help you write code or create an outline for a document. So it's really useful for different domains. But as beginners, there are some common pitfalls to avoid from using chatbots, or to be aware of at the least. The one thing, so I have here as a first point is understanding context. Chatbots might not always grasp the full context of the conversation that you're trying to have with the chatbot. There are a lot of assumptions we make in our minds before asking questions, and sometimes it isn't clear to us when we should mention these or not. Specificity and ambiguity. A lot of beginners don't realize how specific you need to be in a prompt to get the results you expect. You'll actually notice how lazy chatbots are. They'll do the least they need to do for what you've asked them. Handling complex queries. It's quite easy to think that a chatbot, might get something very complex to do, and then expect it to give you the result that you're looking for. But it's actually not the case. A better technique would be to split complex queries into many simpler ones. And the final thing is that not all responses are ethical or safe. There are a lot of issues with copyright, a lot of misinformation, a lot of bias and discrimination, which I'll explain a bit further in the next few slides. But what better way to kind of cement these by going through a real use case that I actually went through while creating this presentation. So you might remember 3 slides ago, I showed you 3 visuals, and I mentioned that they were created by a chatbot. And those were about the core principles of generative AI. I wanted to make my slide a bit more visually appealing. So I thought, okay, let me ask ChatGPT, which is an offering by OpenAI, which everyone can use, in fact. If you just Google OpenAI ChatGPT, you're able to use it. And I asked it, okay, please create a visual. We know the content of the slide. And what's in orange was the prompt, is in fact what I sent to the chatbot. I sent it the title of the slide, and I sent it the 3 main themes that we talked about: learning patterns, generating new data, improvisation, and creativity. The result was okay, but it had quite serious problems. I couldn't choose in a slide like these. First of all, notice how the text is incorrect. It's tried to put some of the main themes of my text on the image, but it's not good at doing that. For example, core principles, it's missing an A. And in fact, if you look at some of the smaller subheadings below that, it's also getting it wrong. Not only that, but you might also sense that it's trying to do too much. It's created 6 separate visuals and tried to place them in one figure. So one thing you might be able to do is use some of the context that chatbots have and say, I like your original concept, but now please take out the text from the above image and insert a white background instead, because I wanted to add the text myself. So because I have better grammar than ChatGPT. But the result was also disappointing. It not only left the text, but in fact redesigned the whole visual in a way that maybe wasn't as fit for purpose for me. So that was quite disappointing. And I want to say, like, this is not the end of the journey, right? I do not want you to be disappointed and stop there. These things take a lot of practice. And this really emphasizes that although we hear that AI has gotten so smart, I think we can't remove the human from the loop just yet. It needs a lot of help from us to really get the results that are requested. So what I've done next really is search online for possible solutions, and it turns out this is quite a common problem. On the right, I've posted a blog post on the OpenAI developer forum for exactly what I'm asking for. How do you stop DALL-E, which is the model, in fact, used by ChatGPT to create an image? How do you stop it from generating text into images? So you'll see that even while I'm using generative AI, I still have used Google, and I still am using the input of other more experienced people with these types of models. And it turns out that there are a lot of techniques to try. And one that worked for me, and I've mentioned before, is to describe what I wanted step by step. I've in fact, in the past 2 slides, the prompt I showed you in orange was quite a complex query, right? I told it to generate a visual. It was very abstract, no real descriptions, no real specificity, with just 3 broad, themes. Didn't do very well. So what if we focus on one visual at a time, one for each theme, and describe a bit more what we'd like to see? So let's try that. My next pass was doing that. In fact, my prompt was, ChatGPT, create a visual for me that depicts a robot sitting at a desk surrounded by books and digital screens, displaying charts and data streams. It's writing notes and it symbolizes the learning process. And it did exactly that. So you'll see that it's just one of the themes. The prompt was a bit longer. It took more effort from me. And it's going to take effort for you to get the results you need most of the time, especially when you deal with auditory and visual data. But it got me wonderful results. And so this is why it's important not to lose faith and keep looking for solutions. And that's one of the prompt engineering techniques that one could use. It's splitting a complex query into more simple ones. I like the robots, so I wanted to use that same robot for my second theme. And so that's something you're able to do, right? Use context to squeeze as much as possible from your chatbot. I said, okay, use the same robot, but now painting on a canvas. And this will represent the AI being able to generate new and unseen data. Great. It's painting the Mona Lisa, but with new features around it. So that's a great depiction of what I tried to say. In fact, I did a less of a good job in this prompt than I did before because I was more abstract. And notice how I did not say Mona Lisa, yet it still drew the Mona Lisa, um, because it knows from how many times it's seen the Mona Lisa on the internet that it's a popular image that we're all gonna recognize. Okay, so takeaways from this use case. Don't be immediately frustrated by chatbots. Writing effective prompts takes a lot of practice. It's not something we can just go in and expect to be experts at, right? We've learned that splitting complex queries works and providing as much detail as possible because chatbots are lazy. Um, and then use the chat context to squeeze more out of the chatbot. So even if the response isn't perfect, if you've liked some elements, you can mention these and ask the chatbot to keep them in any future iterations. So at the tail end of this talk, I wanted to discuss some of the risks associated with using chatbots, specifically AI hallucinations. They're hallucinations from an AI perspective. The definition is creating false or misleading information, and that could happen for a lot of reasons. Models are because of the way they're trained, they try to be overly helpful. And sometimes when they don't have the correct information, they might fabricate information just to please us as users. They also lack proper grounding. They don't have the context and the facts to tell whether they're actually giving you the wrong answer. And they're also very complex models because of how large they are. So it might be very hard for the scientists that build them to actually understand the reasoning and why they hallucinate. But they do. And that's one of the things we have to live with. But there are some ways we can deal with this. As an example, I've used one of my favorite shows, comedy shows called The Office. And I asked ChatGPT 3.5. There's 2 versions available right now, ChatGPT 3.5 and 4. In what episode of The Office does Dwight Schrute crash a car? Now, I know the answer to this. It's actually season 2, episode 12. But in fact, it gave me the wrong answer. It says, okay, it's season 2, episode 1. It doesn't stop there. It tried to actually provide some a context, right? So how did he crash the car? He crashed it into a telephone pole while driving drunk after receiving a world's best boss mug at the Dundee Awards. This never happened. This is an example of a hallucination that I just created this morning. Always double check your responses. Okay. It's very important not to use the responses you're getting right away into some other, maybe use them with someone else or some other system. Very important to always double check the response. But there are actually some ways you can reduce or help you detect the hallucination too. So what are these? First of all, use the latest models. In fact, if you use ChatGPT 4, which I believe is only available if you pay a monthly fee of, I actually don't know, but if you have to pay to get access to it, it actually does give the right result. And the reason is they're way bigger models. And so they've been able to digest way more of the internet. And so it's able to tell you, to give you better results. It still hallucinates though. You might also provide context. Some of the latest models, not just, and here I have I'm focusing a lot on OpenAI's ChatGPT, but there are other models I'm going to talk about. But a lot of the latest ones allow you to upload documents. For example, one thing you could do, if there is a document that you think is a good source of information, you could upload it, and you can in the prompt say, based on the information I've uploaded, please answer this question, and it'll do that, right? So providing that extra information from a source you trust, powered by the AI, conversational AI's ability to understand your prompt, is a very powerful tool. Let's say that doesn't exist. And one way, by the way, to do that is to, one way I do it is to download large Wikipedia pages as PDF and upload them. But another way is to, in fact, ask the chatbot after it's responded, on a scale of 0 to 10, how confident are you in the answer? And please explain your reasoning. Now, if it gives you a high score but doesn't give you a reasoning, or if it gives you a low score, that smells fishy, and you should probably be aware that it might be hallucinating. Okay, and so these types of recursive prompts, where you try to see how the chatbot reasoned to give you the answer, is a very powerful tool. And beyond hallucinations, there are some ethical considerations. We've talked about misinformation and deepfakes. These could be harmful for society and for specific people, especially imagine you're asking for the profile of some um, famous person. You're sometimes going to get wrong information, and that might perpetuate misinformation. You might get bias and discrimination too. There's a famous investigation into Apple, where at the release of their Apple Card, they were consistently issuing higher credit for male applicants compared to female applicants, regardless of income. And they've had to go back and change their AI behind that. And by the way, these ethical considerations are not just for generative AI, they're for AI in general. Copyright and intellectual property. We've seen a few slides ago how, at no prompting at all, the chatbot drew the Mona Lisa, right? That was great, and that was okay because the Mona Lisa is a very well-known um, um, piece of art. But there's no guarantee that the chatbot couldn't have generated or copied art that's quite recent. In fact, something contemporary like Banksy, something that's copyrighted that you really can't use or distribute or change without the consent of the person who holds the intellectual property. That happens. So it's always important to make sure the data you're getting isn't in fact the intellectual property of someone else. And in fact, there are many lawsuits. In fact, there's a famous one here in the US where the New York Times filed a lawsuit against the company that trained or created ChatGPT for exactly doing that, for using its articles to teach their model. And then privacy and data security. It's important to be aware of how AI collects data. It scrapes the data from the web and monitors social media. So anything you have public, it's able to learn. And even if you, in the future, remove your profile and make it private, if the model has seen it in the past, it has it. And it, in fact, might give that information to someone using it. And that's why it's very important before using these tools, especially for work, and especially based on the information you're putting in, to understand the organizational policies. Which tools can you use? A lot of these tools can have enterprise agreements where they actually do not use any of your data for training. But in fact, that's not the case with Google Gemini. And on the bottom right, I've pasted 3 lines from their terms of use, and no one reads these. But in fact, if you read, they actually say that your conversations with their AI are going to be monitored by a human who reviews, annotates, and processes your conversations to improve their product. So be very careful, because if you put proprietary company information or maybe information from some of your clients that would like to be private, there's no guarantee that it will continue being private. And it might, in fact, show up on someone else's screen while using that same model. So as much as possible, anonymize the data you send to the chatbots or post publicly online, and double check the AI responses. You may need to cite them. But what tools can you use? There's Google Gemini, Anthropic's Claude, which is, I think, the more recent one. OpenAI's ChatGPT, which is probably the most famous because they were really the ones that released the first model that really made all the waves in the news and everyone's lives, really. And Bing Copilot, which is a Microsoft product. Now, I like Bing Copilot quite a bit, and the reason is their chatbot is tied to their search system, Bing, right? And so when you type a prompt, it doesn't automatically generate a response. It actually goes and searches the website for content that's related to what you've asked, and it then cites these websites in its answers. And so that increases my confidence and my visibility of where the data is coming from. And the other thing is that it's totally free. You're getting the best models for free, so I would give it a try. And some of this is, I think, my last slide here. What can it really help you day to day? Providing a summary for your document, creating an outline for a new document or presentation. In fact, it helped me create the outline for this presentation. Generating code for anything, really. I use it a lot to generate GIS relevant code for GRASS or ArcPy or other machine learning applications. But always get approval from your company or your organization before using these and before using them for work specifically. Of course, you can use them for your own personal projects, but if you're going to input and maybe have company data in there, you probably need to make sure that these tools are not using your data for retraining for privacy purposes. So thank you for listening to this. It's really been my pleasure. I would encourage you all to reach out if you'd like to follow up to Louisa Bloomer, who's our wonderful director for digital technology in Asia Pacific. She's based in Wellington, New Zealand, and you can see her email up top. And this is my profile below, just to repeat. So thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Assad. That was very informative and interesting. What I would like to do now is open the floor up to any questions for those members of ours who are online. Please, if you do have any questions, pop them into the Slido box and Assad will answer those for you. Sarah, it doesn't look like we have any questions coming through from our members today. But as Asad said, if you do have any, sorry, one has just popped up. 1 second, please. The question is, should we acknowledge AI as an author?
That's a good question. I believe we should. And in fact, each of these tools provide you with a way to automatically generate a citation in the format you'd like. It's important for people reading your content to recognize when your content was generated by AI, I believe, especially in written content that you might disseminate publicly. So I do not believe this is where the ethical concerns become slightly marred, I would say, compared to using content that's created by individuals, where you absolutely have to cite their work, but then having to cite a model that's most probably learned from everyone else's work without citing them. I believe I find it helpful when I see people citing chatbots they've used, just because it's helpful for me to know that it's a chatbot that created this response. I don't think they're as clear yet today. But that's an amazing question. Thank you. I mean, I wish I could hear everyone's voice, but it's just not possible in a webinar like this. Although I would have loved the opportunity to travel to New Zealand for the first time, but it's a bit far from here. Yeah, that's a good question. My experience shows that it doesn't. In fact, sometimes I fall into the trap of chatting with a chatbot the same way I chat with a person, and sometimes I fight the urge of having to say please. But what I wanted to emphasize in this case when I said great is that I wanted the chatbot to stick to its original concept of the robot, right? And by providing that positive feedback, it knows I like the concept. It would have been a great experiment to try another chat and remove great and see what it gives. But I don't think it's clear cut. And a lot of this is subjective. It depends on the model you use and the chatbot you're interacting with. And it's a trial and error. In fact, I know of people who have large databases of prompts they found to work very well with the chatbots they use, and they actively copy and paste them back with a specific question that they have in mind, right? So, the idea of creating effective prompts is definitely a trial and error process. Also, wonderful question. How would you suggest we go about creating an AI policy document in our business? Yes. I could maybe shed some light on how it was done at Stantec. The way it was done was to gather people familiar with AI across the organization into an AI task force that is tasked specifically with finding these use cases, finding the technologies out there, looking at their policies and their privacy and their terms of use. As these people should also be aware of the risks the company is willing to take. For Stantec, Stantec is pretty risk averse, and so they need to be very careful about what they want to approve for use by its employees. And I think from there, the Stantec AI task force was able to, I would say the first thing is education. Let all the employees know the risks of using such technologies, and then which tools the task force approves. Because at the end of the day, I do not believe it is something that could be completely blocked or discouraged. I still do believe people will use chatbots. So my belief is that upfront saying which tools you approve of as an organization is the best way to go. But this is a very high level view of how the task force was able to create such a document. It was a month-long process, definitely. It wasn't a walk in the park.
Thank you, Assad. There are no other questions that have come through, so thank you very much for your time today and for your presentation. And we'll let you go off to sleep now. I know it's night time and quite late over there, so thank you once again.
Yes, it's 9:30 p.m. Well, it's been my absolute pleasure being here today. Sorry again that Louisa wasn't able to join, and I hope she will in the future. And I thank you all really for taking part of this and being attentive. And I wish you all a wonderful rest of the week. Thank you.
Thank you.